I mean, you'll see all kinds of things, like even teams, right? Rally. I'm sure you heard of a rally cap before, right? And when they're looking for some runs and it's late in the game and they're trying to get the bats going and, guys will put their hats on like this or, like a mohawk style, or they'll flip it inside out or go backwards or something. And I know in college, this was a pretty cool one. Whenever we had, we're hitting and there's a 2-ball, 2-strike, 2-out count, the entire team would come up to the front of the dugout as the pitcher's going through his windup. When he started his motion, we start rubbing our hats. And then once he threw the ball, we'd shake our hat like this. And if it was a ball, we'd all drop it onto the ground, right? When we got a hit, when everybody was doing that, you're talking about a crazy bunch of dudes just jumping around going nuts. And just those little types of crazy things, like it's crazy the energy that comes from those and how many times we scored multiple runs just because we got, had a 2-ball, 2-strike, 2-out count sometime during the inning up.
Well, you realized that you were doing witchcraft.
Is that what that is?
I mean,
we're conjuring up the baseball gods?
You are invoking the gods of baseball when you start rubbing the bill of your hat, when you start tapping your head. Understand that that's what a coven, if you think of a witch's coven or a pagan coven, what's built around it is a circle of people, women, men, all of the above, doing the same ritual at the same time, exerting their will, their wishes, their desires, all in a coordinated effort to see some sort of outcome. So
that is hilarious. Never thought of it like that, But it's very true is what you're saying. It's kind of cool. Typically when we bring up baseball gods, it's not in a good way.
It's usually the baseball gods are vengeful and capricious.
Yes, you don't want to piss them off. I'll tell you that much.
So you made the connection there between the ritual that the team is doing and a ritual that a group might do that's, quote, supernatural. Somewhere in between there, in my mind's eye, since we're talking about sports, somewhere in between those two, I saw cheerleaders doing cheers, which are, again, is a ritualized behavior that's focused towards a specific outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So is that, I know that I have seen some teams that had ritual things, some good luck things that would go on with the cheer team and so on. Does that count as magic?
Yes. I mean, I believe so. I mean, because think about it too. The cheerleaders are specifically coordinating the entire stadium to do the ritual.
I was headed there next. Yeah.
So they are the high priestesses of the sports coven.
That's crazy.
And the cheerleaders then become the most powerful magicians in the stadium.
That's pretty wild to think of, right? So what role does the band play?
I'm Rachel Wilkinson, and welcome to Lifemancy. Are you a witch who is also a sports fan? If so, this episode is my special gift to you. But I'm serious when I say, even if you aren't a sports fan, my chat with Jonas and J.A. was fascinating. And I was thrilled to talk to a baseball player who was up close and perhaps way too personal with the superstitions and rituals of the sport. And I know you're probably asking, how is it that you have sports friends, Rachel? Let's just say this is what happens in the weird world of podcasting. It's a community of people like any other, but there's a unique feature found in the majority of podcasters, especially the nonfiction ones. They have an insatiable interest in the lives of other people. And so today is the hilarity that happens when a professional baseball player meets a witch and a Lifemancy guest decides to become the host. Let's get to the astrology report so we can get into it. We are in the midst of Mercury retrograde while the new moon is in Libra. The new moon also conjuncts Mars. And with this combination, you're really going to need to watch what you say. You may find yourself starting arguments or getting sucked into them. Mars comes in with this shot of energy espresso, while Mercury complicates communication. You might feel tense or anxious, or maybe like you can't relax. So you're going to want to channel that excess energy into something productive and perhaps meditative. Maybe even consider taking up a sport. Exercise and physical activity are going to be the best ways to burn off whatever has you hot right now. But just keep in mind the energy is a little tense. So just take a breath. Everything is going to be okay. But if you want to know maybe what's going on in your life personally, or how you can kind of get through the next few weeks, I am doing tarot readings for Halloween. So if you are interested in a 20-minute virtual reading, one-on-one, if that sounds fun to you, head to lifemancy.com, and there you'll get the details. So let's get to baseball. So back in the baseball episode 2, I talked about this book, Ball, Bat, and Bishop by Robert Henderson. And it traced the origins of our modern sports to ancient fertility rituals and mock combat. In it, he talks about one of the earliest examples that took place at a temple in ancient Egypt, where votaries of the god Osiris lined up at some distance from the temple. And they had with them a wheeled cart that was gilded and had the picture of Osiris painted on it. Now, the object of this group of priests was to rush the image of Osiris through the temple door. But standing in front of that door was a defensive line of men with wooden bats. Now, don't worry, the priests of Osiris weren't entirely defenseless. They also had an array of men wielding wooden clubs to beat back anyone who might try to stop them. So, when everyone was ready, the men holding on to the cart of Osiris would storm the gates as the men beat each other with clubs. Then the author includes a quote from the story that he had gotten this from. And that quote was, "There was hard fighting with clubs and heads were broken, but no lives were lost." And on that note, let me introduce today's guests. Jonas Bull and Jonathan Anderson are hosts of the Noonish live sports and tech show. They, along with former Baltimore Ravens star Mark Clayton, talk about the current events in sports, whether football, basketball, baseball, boxing, and even esports. They have special guests, including players, coaches, and trainers. Jonas specifically has a second podcast called Education is Painful, where he interviews guests about hard lessons learned. And Jonathan was drafted into the Cubs in 2000, and this summer played in the Celebrity Softball Classic. So let's all be very nice to the sports gentlemen as they wonder what the heck they're doing on a podcast about the occult.
So how did you two meet?
That's a long story.
Yeah, so there was a pretty large project taking place down here in Dallas, and I took it on back in my last. This is actually what got me to start my own company, but there was a huge bond being passed by the city of Dallas to centralize the communications and build a innovative hub, if you must, for the colleges, the college district here. And it was a project I was working on, and we threw a workshop, and we had, I would like to think, the smartest minds around the city come around and give their input on some things we could do for the educational system. And of course, Jonas showed up. You know, he's just a good dude. And out of all 53 of those people, Jonas is the one dude that I've developed a great relationship with. So, you know, he's just an excellent resource and ton of knowledge. And, yeah, we've been hanging out ever since, you know, making shows and drinking whiskey.
I almost needed a drink. I thought we might start the interview with a drink. And then I saw that, Jay, you were driving, and I was like, let's not.
Oh, you should have told me. I'd have stayed put, boy. For sure.
Yeah. So what inspired you to do Noonish?
Oh, we came together, and it was funny. Mark came by the office one day, by the studio, and at the time, it was an office inside of a studio. And we were just sitting and talking. And Jonas and I, you know, we had kind of tossed the idea around a few times previously throughout the year. I was just saying, man, I really want to do a podcast. And, we were sitting at the table and just mentioned it to Mark. He was like, well, let's do it, while you're still talking about it. So, that next week we showed back up to the office and just with not a clue as to what we were doing, just started the podcast.
The Noonish thing started as us just getting together and talking, and we actually developed the idea of what we were going to talk about as we were producing episodes badly.
As you were making it.
But as we went along, it was interesting because we had Jonathan coming from a sports background, and Mark coming from a sports background, and me coming from a military background, and recognizing that there was a similar type of transition from an organization where we had structure in terms of what we did from day to day. We had structure in terms of, who we were around and what we stood for. I mean, you're literally wearing a uniform. And then when you leave that, you don't have anything to fall back on. So that structure that you've lived with for however many months or years is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't done anything to prepare yourself, if you don't have, something to do when you get out, where do you go? And you see so many people who leave the military, who leave sports, even who leave corporate jobs, suddenly find themselves with no support net. And that was one of the things that we wanted to talk about. And drink whiskey.
And drink whiskey, yes.
It's a great excuse to day drink.
Yeah. Now it has been sort of a yearly tradition that I do a baseball episode. And then when I ran into Jonas and we were talking about doing an interview exchange, we realized that there was this sports thing. And then JA came around and was like, well, there's a baseball player. So it sort of felt fated that we all needed to get together and talk about baseball.
When Jonas asked me about it, I was like, man, you have no idea how many superstitious people there are in baseball. Like, it's a part of it. It seems like it always has been since I've played, since I was 8 years old. So great time to come and talk about something.
Yeah, so that one of the very first episodes I did was about some of those superstitions. And Jonas, we even talked about rituals of the mind, that it's superstitions and that ball players have these rituals that if you break the ritual, they are completely thrown off everything.
Absolutely. And they get gross too, man. Like some dudes don't wash their pants and, jock straps, and it's all kinds of nastiness going on, man. Like definitely not built for COVID, but it's pretty wild the extremes people will go to keep that hitting streak alive or just to feel comfortable in a game. It's pretty funny, actually.
What is the most extreme example you saw of a superstitious ritual?
Oh my gosh. Underwear. Wearing the same pair of underwear for I have no idea how long. And I mean, holes in them, and you see all kinds of stuff in the clubhouse, But that was just a disgusting thing to me. I just thought that dude, I never felt comfortable around that guy.
You never shook that man's hand?
Nah, you can't. That's a whole nother level. And he wasn't even hitting that good is the thing. It's like, bro, like, you got to change something up. I think it's time to get some new underwear, bro, for dang sure.
When we talked earlier, kind of previously before the show, I was talking about how sports was based on old fertility rituals. But if you go into the way, 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 way back, like 4,000 years ago, sports was mock combat between civilizations or groups or cultural groups. And the mock combat aspect, this idea of two groups separating and being in combat with each other, was also about summer and winter coming together, and that's the fertility aspect of it. So you have spring fertility where all of these things it's all about creation. And you will also see that in sports, because you will see that the sports that play in the spring are about making things, and the sports that play in the fall are about destroying things. It's very weird.
Yeah, that is strange. That's very strange.
Mm-hmm.
I had never even thought about that before.
Like baseball is a spring sport. You, as your team, are trying to get the most of something, but while the other team is trying to stop you from making something, making runs, making hits, making whatever, you go to football, which is a fall sport, and you are trying to run down the other team to get into their territory. So you are trying to destroy the other team.
I think that's pretty much the exact language that is used. Destroy the other team.
Destroying. Hockey, the same thing. It's what, November, October-ish, right? When they get started up. I've never thought about that before.
You came to the show for me to blow your minds.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in baseball, we're destroying a baseball,
Well, you're using the baseball to make something. So the baseball, like you are trying to put so much energy behind a thing that it goes out of the park, that you are trying to explode things from you, which has that spring aspect, this idea of things springing out of energy. Whereas you have the fall and the winter, things are about closing in. You're trying to hang on to your ball and run it into an end zone, so it is the
Interesting.
So the jersey I'm wearing is from The Natural, right? Roy Hobbs. And it's probably my favorite baseball movie ever. And what you're saying is like extremely interesting. And, he's got the lightning bolt. That's like,
yeah, the lightning bolt hits the tree, and he uses the tree from the lightning strike to create a bat that becomes his magic item. That is his magic bat.
Yes. And then the lightning bolt strikes again when he breaks his bat on a foul ball. And then the bat boy brings him the bat that he made, that he destroys the lights with, right? It's crazy. He used that bat for such a long time, and he felt more powerful, more of a complete ball player just because of the bat in his hands. And, in ball, we're like, it's not the tool, it's the user, right? Like, don't come over here talking about switching bats when you can't hit. The bat's not going to help. But from a mental standpoint, I had a similar bat. I used a black 33.5 C271. And though I had like 6 of them, there was one that I just loved. And they all same weight, same everything, right? But for whatever reason, this one bat in particular, I went on a 19-game hitting streak, right? And kind of the same thing happened. That back broke. I pulled out another one. I hit a home run my next at bat. But then after that, even though I had the exact same bat in my hands, mentally, I just didn't feel the same for the rest of the season. And I mean, I still hit well, but I didn't have that same energy for whatever reason. It's such a strange way that we trick our minds and trick ourselves and put so much into these tools, right? And these superstitions that we allow to drive us. It's just crazy, and I don't understand it, but it's very real.
So the team or any of your teams, did you guys have a ritual before each game as a group? Because you see some of it on television where they, everybody hits the top of a doorway or touches a sign or something like that. Did you have something similar?
I will say one of my teams, we had probably the weirdest ritual, but it was so much fun. We'd get in a circle and start jumping around, and the backup catcher would start breakdancing, and that would loosen everybody up. Like he'd start doing the worm and doing all kinds of stuff in the middle of the circle. And that was an amazing ritual that we did all year long. And we played really well that year too. It's kind of strange. And there's a team called the Savannah Bananas. Y'all should go check them out. They do all kinds of stuff out there, all types of rituals. And evidently they're like the most fun team in all of sports. And they've won their league 6 consecutive seasons in a row.
Wow.
And it's pretty weird how that transfer of energy can then translate onto the field.
Oh, well, I also wonder, too, if you're talking about needing to be loose and if you're having fun and if it's the funnest team there is, that if everybody's laughing and having a good time and is relaxed and have all of those endorphins going, then they're in their own zones.
Yes. Yeah. And that's in a good place, in a good mental place, And it's definitely home for the advantage, but they said that when the team is having fun, it allows you to play better. And I mean, that shouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, but putting them in that mental space, to have fun, I think is another thing that coaches could do a little better. Some coaches and managers, for sure.
To use more of the carrot than the stick.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So I do think some of the listeners might be interested in what it was like to be drafted. Would you mind talking about what it was like to be drafted? I'm sure you get it all the time.
Yeah, no, it was weird. It was an awesome experience. At the time, I was a knucklehead. I was 17 years old. And didn't know any better and just figured that was what it was supposed to be, Like, this is how everybody experiences life in baseball. But No, it was a very cool experience. The whole process, that entire year, it was weird. I was at football practice that fall, and we were getting ready for the playoffs, and there was a guy in the parking lot just standing there, and it wasn't a parent, and no one knew who it was, and we didn't want the other team stealing our plays. So one of the coaches walked over and asked the gentleman who he was, and it was a scout from the Yankees, and he showed him this massive World Series ring, right? And that was in the fall, and around late October, early November when that happened. And I got really close to that scout with the Yankees. His name was Mark Batchko, and he would pick me up just about every weekend. We go to the hitting cage or whatever, and he's constantly asking me, have any other teams contacted you yet? And I was like, no, not yet. And he's like, they will, don't worry. So spring rolls around, and he was sure enough right. And it was just crazy. I had the Minnesota Twins pulling me out of class for batting practice, and 30 to 40 scouts at every baseball game just lining up down the first baseline, clocking my times and throwing batting practice to me before the games. And it was just a crazy experience. And when the draft came about, I went to some pre-draft workouts or whatnot. And I had 26 teams or so come sit in my living room of my house and just telling me all these things and interviewing me and my family and all this stuff and telling me where they thought I would go in the draft. And so the draft comes around, and the first day I actually got called by the Oakland Athletics first, telling me they were going to take me. And I thought I was going to go, to the A's. And it was crazy because I played with the A's my entire life before I went over to the Dallas Tigers as a kid. And, I was stoked and really excited, and come to find out they didn't take me. I was like, whoa, this is a bummer, right? So I get a call right after that by the Chicago Cubs, and you talk about a roller coaster ride. I was elated, right? And no one in my family had experienced anything like this. So luckily, Billy Martin Jr. was my agent advisor at the time. His dad was the head coach for the Yankees back in the day. And he had a lot of experience with, the draft, and Joe Nathan was one of his players. And I was really excited as a kid. Didn't really understand how big of an accomplishment it was. But as I got older, it helped me to realize what took place and how big that was as a 17-year-old kid out of Dallas, Texas, to go to the Cubs was a pretty awesome experience for sure.
I mean, I think that's pretty amazing. And one of the aspects of this podcast, too, is called Lifemancy, because the idea is that how do you overcome a lot of the difficulties, struggles, disappointments in your life? And the advice here is, get weird, do magic. Start getting outside your comfort zone, start doing things that aren't necessarily mainstream or aren't conventional, because you have to find out who you are as a person and what speaks to you and what moves you forward. And so I'm kind of curious, a question to the both of you is, how has your experience or your challenges, setbacks, difficulties that you've had in your life, how has that played a part in the person that you are now?
I'll let you take that, Jonas.
I think in my life have found a lot of opportunity to fail. There's been a lot of times when I could have made different decisions. And one of the great revelations of life that I kind of think you have to come to on your own, you can't, people will tell you, but you just have to grow into it to some extent, is that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make the wrong decision. And sometimes that wrong decision turns out to be the right decision, or sometimes that mistake turns out to be a win. Mm-hmm. You just didn't know it at the time. And a lot of that has to do with what you choose to do with the things that life throws you. And to put that in about as woo-woo as I usually get, there's an energy that flows through your life and through the world that you can say that it's God's will. You can say that it's magical forces. The fact of the matter is that it's there and it pushes you in certain directions. You can fight against it or you can just go with it. And sometimes that's difficult. Sometimes that's painful. Sometimes you learn hard lessons along the way. But if you choose to go with that energy, you end up where you need to be.
Yeah.
Which sometimes that's not a comfy couch.
No.
Sometimes it's a hard place, but there's a lesson there for you to learn. There's good things for you to take away from that if you're willing to accept them. And then the other hard lesson to me is that sometimes you don't make the right decision even with all that, and you have to move on. You have to keep moving. Mm-hmm. If you let those bad things from the past control your life now, you've already lost. You're not living anymore at that point.
Right.
And you either have to break out of it or just continue to choose to accept the fact that you're a flawed person and keep building.
Well, J.A., do you have any thoughts as we close the interview on how your past has made you the person you are today?
Oh, man. All the experiences of my past have made me believe that anything is possible, really. You know, I think thoughts are seeds. I don't think that a thought can come across your mind without it being possible, right? It's just a matter of how much effort and energy you want to put towards it to make happen. Dreams, whatever it might be, if the thought is there, it can be obtained, whatever it is. So, you know, I'm a very, I don't know if it's superstitious, but spiritual, or I mean, however you want to define it. But I definitely believe in a higher power that gives us the ability to do anything that enters into our minds and into our hearts. So I know I've had a ton of experiences as a young buck that helped me to, you know, believe that if I'm getting comfortable, I know I'm in the wrong place. So I try to make myself as uncomfortable as possible and figure it out from there constantly. But no, I definitely see the things from my past and how they've helped me to become who I am today, whatever it might be, the experiences, whether good or bad. I'm appreciating and enjoying the journey for dang sure. So
that's good. That's good. Well, I appreciate both of you spending your time with me today and coming and to talk to us about sports and rituals and letting me blow your mind a little bit. That's pretty exciting. So, yeah, you guys have a great afternoon. Thanks again.
Thank you for having us. Enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
Good.
If you want more of Jonas and J.A., you can watch their show Noonish Live Sports and Tech on YouTube. They just posted their season 3 finale this week. And you can also check out the other ways to follow them at their website, noonishpodcast.com. And speaking of season finales, I'm not ready to say my season 3 is over quite yet, but I do need to take a break so I can get my life together. Hopefully it's just for a couple of weeks, but pretty much everyone rescheduled all of my 2020 commitments to September and October. And then I decided I needed to put out this vampire audio drama for Halloween. And good Lord, what a sweet summer child I was. The amount of editing required for the sound design of that audio drama is absolutely bonkers. And I had no idea, just zero. Let me put it in perspective, because this is what helps most people realize just how naive I was. When I edit Lifemancy, there are usually about 5 to 10 different tracks of audio. There's my narration, like I'm talking to you now. The interview usually has a couple of tracks, and any music I use. Those are all separate pieces I have to weave together to make a podcast episode. And if I am feeling really frisky, like when I do solo episodes, those can get as complex as 10 different tracks or lines of audio. Well, one episode of Vampire the Masquerade Port Saga is over 80 tracks. I was absolutely gobsmacked by this. And on top of that, I said I was going to put out an episode a week. So yeah, I need to put a sign around my neck that says, "What were you thinking?" and go stand in a corner until I've learned my lesson. But at the point at which I was sitting at my desk and watched Dayan go to sleep one night, get up the next morning for work, and then come home from work and cook dinner the next day, and I had not slept nor left my desk, I realized I had a problem. So my plan is to stop Patreon from charging patrons until I can get back to doing Lifemancy episodes again. I'm going to also unlock the backdated bonus content for season 3 a little earlier than usual for everyone. My hope is that I'll be able to go edit those episodes and then get back here, and I will keep you all informed on the progress of that. I know that this might be disappointing for some of you, but until I can be more than a one-woman show, here we are. So in the meantime, I highly recommend following me on TikTok at Rachel J. Wilkinson. I actually am really enjoying TikTok when I have time to do it. I don't have time to do it very often, but I really like this idea of creating this little vignette, so I think I might be doing more of that, which, we'll see. It depends, again, how much time, because I have none. And also, you can also follow me at, wait for it, Twitter at Ray J. Wilkinson. And I swear I'd never Twitter. Apparently I lied because here we are. Anyway, thanks so much for understanding. And until next time, friends, get some sleep and take a drink of water.